Welcome back to Raw Historian, where we bring the past to life, unfiltered, unpolished, and as real as it happened. In the year 1584, Japan was a land of chaos. Warlords battled for supremacy, and the sword was the only law. In this age of blood and honor, one man rose to legendary status, a man who would never taste defeat. His name was Miyamoto Musashi. Musashi was born in Harima Province, a rural region of Japan. His father was a samurai master of the sword, and his childhood was anything but gentle. By the time most boys were learning to write, Musashi was already learning to kill. He was a big child, tall and strong for his age, and his temper was just as fierce. According to legend, his first duel came at just 13 years old, when he challenged a samurai named Arima Kihei. Armed only with a wooden staff, Musashi beat Arima to death. The boy was no longer just a boy. He was now a warrior. Japan was in the middle of the Sengoku period, an era where young fighters could earn fame through duels. Musashi left home and began wandering the country, challenging the best swordsmen he could find. By his 20s, Musashi had fought over a dozen duels and won them all. But it wasn't just raw strength. Musashi was unorthodox. He fought with what became known as Niten-ichi Ryu, the two heavens as one style, wielding two swords at once, something unheard of at the time. He didn't fight fair. He fought to win. The most famous moment of Musashi's life came in 1612, when he faced Sasaki Kojiro, known as the Demon of the Western Provinces. Kojiro was a master of the deadly swallow cut technique, and the fight was set for a remote island. Musashi arrived hours late. Whether it was arrogance or psychological warfare, no one knows. He stepped off the boat, carrying not a steel blade, but a wooden sword he had carved from an oar. Kojiro attacked first, swinging with lightning speed. Musashi sidestepped, and with one brutal strike to the skull, killed him instantly. The undefeated streak lived on. After the duel with Sasaki Kojiro, Musashi's fame reached every corner of Japan. Samurai whispered his name, and young swordsmen dreamed of testing their skill against him. But Musashi didn't bask in glory. He kept moving. His travels took him to the courts of powerful lords, where he fought in official matches and trained warriors. Yet, Musashi avoided becoming any daimyo's permanent retainer. For him, loyalty was not to a single man, but to the way of the sword itself. Years before the Kojiro fight, Musashi faced one of his most dangerous challenges. The Yoshioka clan of Kyoto, famous for their sword school. It began when Musashi defeated Yoshioka Seijuro, the head of the family. This humiliation sparked a chain of revenge. Musashi next fought Seijuro's brother, Den Shichiro, and killed him as well. The clan, desperate to save face, challenged him a third time. This time, it was an ambush. Musashi walked into a trap, dozens of armed men hiding among the pines. What followed became legend. Musashi fought with both swords in a frenzy of precision and ferocity. The ground ran red, and he cut his way out alive. The Yoshioka name would never recover. Not all of Musashi's fights were duels. In 1600, he took part in Japan's most famous battle, Sekigahara, the clash that decided the nation's ruler. Records differ on which side Musashi fought for, but it's believed he joined the Western Army, which lost. For most warriors, defeat in such a massive battle will be the end of their story. For Musashi, it was just another chapter. He escaped, wandering into the mountains, sharpening his craft even further. By his 40s, Musashi had grown into more than just a fighter. He began speaking of Heiho, the way of strategy. To Musashi, the sword was not about killing, but about mastering life. He studied painting, poetry, and sculpture. He sketched falcons, wrote letters to friends, and crafted wooden weapons with the same precision he once used to carve through armor. His brush strokes were as deliberate as his sword strokes. In 1643, feeling death approaching, Musashi retreated to a remote cave in Kyushu called Reigando. There, in the dim light, he wrote his masterpiece, Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings. In 1645, Musashi knew his time had come. He dressed in full armor, took up his sword, and sat upright in meditation. When the end arrived, he did not flinch. He left behind no wife, no children, only his students, his art, and the legend of the man who never lost. Miyamoto Musashi's life was not just a story of battles. It was the journey of a man who sought perfection in all things. A reminder that the sharpest blade is forged not in steel, but in the mind. They called him Saifullah, the Sword of God, a man whose mere presence on the battlefield could turn defeat into victory. In over 100 battles, he was never defeated. This is the story of Khalid ibn al-Walid. Around the year 592 CE, in the bustling city of Mecca, Khalid ibn al-Walid was born into the powerful Banu Makhzum clan of the Quraysh tribe. His family was wealthy, respected, and feared. From a young age, Khalid was trained in the arts of war, riding horses, handling weapons, and leading men. In the deserts of Arabia, survival meant strength, and Khalid was already shaping into a predator. When the Prophet Muhammad began preaching Islam, the Quraysh opposed him fiercely. Khalid, a loyal son of his tribe, joined the resistance. At the Battle of Uhud in 625 CE, Khalid commanded the Quraysh cavalry. Using his unmatched skills in maneuver warfare, he exploited a gap in the Muslim ranks, leading a devastating charge from behind. The Muslims suffered heavy losses. For years, Khalid fought against the Prophet and the growing Muslim community, but destiny had other plans. In 629 CE, after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, Khalid began to see that Islam's message was spreading across Arabia and that the old ways were crumbling. On his journey to Medina, Khalid met two other prominent Quraysh warriors, Amr ibn al-As and Uthman ibn Talha, who were also heading to embrace Islam. The three entered the city together and pledged allegiance to the Prophet Muhammad. The former enemy had now become one of Islam's greatest champions. Soon after his conversion, Khalid faced his first true test, the Battle of Mu'tah. The Muslims, vastly outnumbered by the Byzantine forces, lost their commanders one after another. When Khalid took command, the situation was desperate. Outnumbered perhaps 20-1, he used a masterstroke, rotating his units and disguising retreat as renewed attack. This confused the Byzantines, allowing the Muslims to withdraw without total annihilation. For this feat, the Prophet Muhammad gave him the title Saifullah, the Sword of God. In 630 CE, the Muslims marched on Mecca. This time, Khalid rode not as its defender, but as its liberator. His leadership helped ensure the city fell with minimal bloodshed, ending centuries of tribal warfare and uniting Arabia under Islam. After the Prophet Muhammad's death in 632 CE, the Arabian Peninsula plunged into the Ridda Wars, a series of rebellions and false prophets rising up. Khalid was sent to crush them. Against Musaylima the Leader, in the fierce battle of Yamamah, Khalid's tactics and relentless assault broke the enemy lines, securing Islam's survival in its most vulnerable moment. Once Arabia was secure, Khalid's genius was unleashed beyond its borders. Under Caliph Abu Bakr, he was sent north to face the mighty Byzantine Empire and east against the Sassanid Persians, the two superpowers of the age. Khalid moved his forces with a speed that stunned his enemies. In Iraq, he destroyed Persian armies at Ulais, Walaja, and Uballa, using enveloping tactics centuries ahead of their time. At Walaja, he pulled off a double envelopment maneuver that historians still study today. The same strategy Hannibal used at Cannae. Perhaps Khalid's most audacious move came in 634 CE. Ordered to reinforce Muslim armies in Syria, he chose a shortcut across the harsh Syrian desert. It was a gamble. With limited water, the army could have perished in days. But Khalid timed the march perfectly, rationed supplies, and led his men to emerge in Syria unexpectedly, striking the Byzantines where they least expected and securing a string of victories. In 636 CE, the fate of the Levant hung in the balance. The Byzantine Emperor Heraclius gathered a massive force to drive the Muslims out. The armies met at Yarmouk. For 6 days, the battle raged. Cavalry charges, archery volleys, and brutal close combat. Khalid's leadership was unmatched. He reorganized units mid-battle, executed precise counterattacks, and coordinated feigned retreats that lured the Byzantines into traps. When the dust settled, the Byzantine army was shattered. Syria was lost to them forever. Despite his unmatched success, Khalid's career ended in controversy. Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, fearing the Muslims might begin to place their faith in Khalid rather than God, removed him from command. Khalid accepted the decision without rebellion. He continued to serve as a soldier, proof that for him, victory was not about personal glory. In 642 CE, far from the battlefield, Khalid fell ill in Homs, Syria. Lying on his deathbed, he is said to have wept. "I fought in so many battles, seeking death where it could be found, but here I am, dying in my bed, like a camel. May the eyes of cowards never find rest." He died at around 50 years old, having never suffered defeat in combat. Khalid ibn al-Walid was more than a warrior. He was a master of strategy. Loved by his men, feared by his enemies, and remembered as one of the greatest military minds in history. This is the life of Alexander the Great. In 356 BCE, in the ancient city of Pella, Macedonia, a boy was born to King Philip II and Queen Olympias. They named him Alexander. From the moment of his birth, myths surrounded him. Olympias claimed lightning struck her womb in a dream, and some whispered he was destined to be more than mortal. From an early age, Alexander was surrounded by power, ambition, and the ever-present shadow of war. His father was a master tactician, uniting the fractious Greek city-states under Macedonian rule. His mother filled his mind with stories of Achilles and Hercules, heroes whose glory Alexander would grow up determined to surpass. At 13, Alexander's father hired the philosopher Aristotle to tutor him. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander studied philosophy, science, medicine, and the art of leadership. But alongside knowledge, Aristotle instilled in him a belief that a man's destiny was his to shape. When Alexander was just 16, his father left for war and placed him in charge of Macedonia. A Thracian tribe rebelled, and Alexander responded with speed and brutality, crushing the revolt and founding a city he named Alexandropolis. In 336 BCE, King Philip was assassinated, stabbed at a wedding celebration. The throne passed to 20-year-old Alexander. Immediately, his rule was challenged. Greek city-states saw his youth as weakness, and enemies circled like vultures. Alexander acted fast. He marched south, forcing the Greek cities into submission. When Thebes rebelled, he destroyed it completely, killing thousands and selling survivors into slavery. The message was clear: defy Alexander, and you would cease to exist. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed into Asia Minor with 40,000 men to take on the mighty Persian Empire, the superpower of the ancient world. His first major test came at the Battle of the Granicus River, where he personally led a cavalry charge straight into enemy lines, nearly dying in the process. The Persians were routed. Over the next year, Alexander swept through Asia Minor, liberating Greek cities from Persian rule and winning support wherever he went. But the real test lay ahead, facing King Darius III of Persia himself. At the Battle of Issus in 333 BCE, Alexander faced a massive Persian army. Outnumbered, he used the terrain to his advantage, pinning the Persians in a narrow plain. In the chaos, Alexander led a direct assault at Darius himself. The sight of Alexander charging with his spear caused Darius to flee, abandoning his army and his family to the Macedonians. For Alexander, it was not just a victory, but a humiliation for the Persian king. From there, Alexander marched down the Levant, taking city after city. The siege of Tyre became legendary. The city was built on an island, but Alexander built a causeway from the mainland, turning it into a bloody victory. He moved into Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator. At the Oracle of Siwa, priests declared him the son of Zeus Ammon, a divine figure. Whether Alexander believed it or not, he never discouraged the rumors. In 331 BCE, Alexander met Darius again at Gaugamela. This time, Darius had an army that dwarfed Alexander's. Yet Alexander's strategy, a feigned retreat, followed by a lightning strike at the Persian center, broke the enemy lines. Once again, Darius fled. Soon after, Alexander entered Babylon, then Susa, then Persepolis, the heart of Persia. He burned Persepolis in a drunken night of revenge for the Persian burning of Athens a century earlier. Despite the terror they caused, Alexander's tactics prevailed, and he treated Porus with respect, even making him an ally. But after years of campaigning, his men were exhausted. At the Hyphasis River, they refused to march further. Reluctantly, Alexander turned back. On the return journey, Alexander pushed his army through the brutal Gedrosian desert, losing thousands to heat and thirst. In 323 BCE, he returned to Babylon, planning new campaigns into Arabia. But fate intervened. He fell ill, possibly from malaria, typhoid, or poisoning, and died at just 32 years old. His last words remain a mystery, but his generals asked, who should inherit his empire? His reply, to the strongest. Alexander the Great's life is a reminder of what ambition, vision, and sheer will can achieve, and how quickly it can all slip away. Thank you for tuning in to raw historian. If you enjoyed this journey into the life of one of history's greatest conquerors, make sure to like, subscribe, and join us again. Thank you